Hey there, folks. So I'm gonna take a crack at my my one annual video on a topic that maybe won't be demonetized. Uh, this channel. Anyways, I want to talk about consent. I want to talk about it in the broad strokes, but also in some specific ways. Consent is a topic I've talked about before. Not as much here, but some on my channel that actually pays my bills, that being Council of Geeks. But it's been on my mind lately for a couple of reasons. It's something I care about in general, but also it has felt like it's been coming up lately. Some of the most recent videos over on the other channel have been on things like heated rivalry, which has really excellent examples of consent that I'll talk about as we go. 50 Shades of Grey, which is abysmal in its depictions of consent. But also, something happened at a burlesque show that I hosted. On Valentine's Day in Montpelier, Vermont, which is the state capital, I hosted a drag and burlesque show. I love hosting. I do more hosting than performing these days. I really do enjoy it. And it was interesting. I hadn't been in Montpelier for a show in a while, and I'm pretty comfortable in saying most of this particular audience didn't know me, and I wasn't entirely sure how they would take to the show in general and me in particular. Thankfully, everything went quite well. But there was a moment on the back end, I forget why it came up, somewhere in my vamping, because part of my job as the host is to keep the audience entertained while they clear out whatever is left over from the previous performer and set up for the next one. Somewhere in my ramblings, the topic of consent came up, and somebody in the audience, somebody who I couldn't see because of the lights, but who sounded like, to me at least, like they were in their 20s, called out, "No means no," which is true, but also gave me pause. Because of course I know that phrase. That's the phrase that has been hammered into me certainly since the 80s. I don't know when it dates to specifically, but to me, at least in my mind, it started to really pick up traction in the 80s. And it's not a bad notion. It's not a bad phrase. Certainly not a bad idea. But it troubles me that it really does seem to be, broadly speaking and culturally, still where our standards of consent are. And that worries me. Now again, I'm not disagreeing with the sentiment of no means no, but I'm troubled that we haven't moved on from that, because I think there are much better models of consent than that we really should have adopted by now. Oddly, I find myself comparing it to, of all things, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Because if you're younger than me, then if you know what Don't Ask, Don't Tell was at all, then you probably know it as like something that was bad. It was this idea that if you were gay in the military, they could remove you from the military for that, but they also weren't allowed to ask you about it, and you were not obligated to tell them. So as long as you kept it to yourself, i.e. stayed in the closet, you could serve in the military. And don't get me wrong, the place where it ultimately went when that policy was repealed and replaced with the idea of you can be open and still serve was so much better. But I feel like for people who either weren't alive yet when that policy was first implemented or were too young to understand it, they don't realize that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was progressive at the time it was implemented. Because before that, your superior officers could ask around about you, could dig for information, and you were expected to tell them. And then they would remove you if you were in fact gay. So while in the abstract, it's not a great policy for things to be like, look, we're not going to ask you, but like, don't do anything where we know you are, because then we'll kick you out anyway. Like, that's not great, but it is better than we can basically interrogate you about your sexuality. The implementation of, hey, stop asking people about that. If they don't say anything, leave it alone. That was better. But part of why it was better was because, A, things were really bad before that, but also because we moved on from it. It was a stepping stone towards where things should ultimately end up, and they did, which is you can serve openly. No means no to me feels like we are stuck on what should have been a stepping stone, because we really need to move on to better models of consent. Now again, I don't disagree with no means no. Honestly, I think it's worth noting that broadly speaking, consent as a concept, unless you are a monster, pretty much everybody agrees that consent is a good thing. Where we get lost in the weeds and the discourse is what counts as consent. What is required to accept that consent has in fact happened. Those are the nuts and bolts where people get tied up. But pretty much anybody, unless they are, again, a monster, will agree that yes, consent is something that should be in place if things are going to move forward in a sexual manner. Here's the thing about no means no. Again, better than nothing, because emphasizing that does put into place like, okay, if somebody is stopping you, stop. I know it sounds frankly kind of rapey that needed to be said as much as it was and still is, but it does. Our culture, our patriarchal, male-driven culture, has long pushed in general depictions of what is sexy for a man, just for the man to take, to go in for the kiss without asking, to just grab a woman and start making out, and to take what they think they are owed. There was a time when the idea of like, if she says no, you listen, was, if not radical, certainly progressive and further along than we were. But it's been, again, to my memory, around 40 years. We're still at the starting point. Here's the problem with no means no. While it is a very good thing that when you hear no, you stop, and also, quick asterisks, please do not come in here to get pedantic with me about like, okay, but what about, are you kink shaming? Because there's BDSM situations where like somebody says no, but they don't mean it. Like, okay, look, I shouldn't have to say this, but I will. There are certain kink and BDSM scenarios where if you have negotiated in advance for the specifics of the scene, have agreed that the word no will not end the scene, there is still going to be a word, a safe word that will end the scene and will function as a no, even if the actual word no is not going to stop the scene. So in that situation, if it is being done safely and consensually, there is still a word that will have the same function as no, even if it isn't the word no. So don't give me any of that. And for the record, if you don't have a safe word in place, then it's not kink, it's abuse. So, with that having been said, the problem with no means no, while it is a very good thing to agree that, okay, if I hear a no, I stop. How much damage have you done prior to that? How far have you gone that is already past someone's point of comfort? Because not everyone jumps straight to no when they're uncomfortable. Some people will squirm, maybe try and look away. There'll be nonverbal cues that maybe you're missing or ignoring because you didn't hear the magic word of no. By the time you've heard the word no, there's a very good chance you've already pushed past somebody's comfort levels several steps back. But more than that, no means no puts the onus on the person who you are attracted to stop you. It becomes their responsibility to express their displeasure, their discomfort, and to stop you. And if they don't, and you have exceeded their comfort, it becomes their fault because they didn't say no. If you've ever been in a conversation or seen situations where people, usually men, will ask victims of assault, usually women, why didn't you fight back? Or why didn't you fight back harder? That is what happens when the only safety valve, the only security that we have, the only means of stopping things is no means no. There are people who will be hurt by that because they didn't say the right words or in the right way, or they froze up and didn't say anything at all. Instead of creating a world in which you don't start doing this until you know they want it, you create a world in which people are basically incentivized to not look for whether or not somebody is enjoying it, but instead to look for them stopping you. And if they haven't, well, maybe keep going. I don't like to use the word or the term, I guess, rape culture. I think it's often deployed kind of frivolously and very inflammatorily, but that's what this is. A world in which it is the responsibility of the person that you are attracted to stop you, rather than your responsibility to be sure and find out that that attraction is in any way mutual before you proceed at all. That is rape culture, because it encourages you to move forward until stopped. And at what point you're stopped may or may not be the point at which they actually wanted you to stop. That's why I don't say no means no when having conversations about consent. Yes means yes, and nothing means yes other than yes. Again, similar asterisks to what I said about the term no, which is that if you know someone well enough, if you actually have developed a rapport, if you have built a relationship and you know each other well enough that you can catch nonverbal cues, that you can catch and you read their moods, that you know from body language and other ways that you have of communicating because you've developed that rapport, okay, maybe you don't specifically need the word yes, but that's because you've built that. If you're dealing with someone who you do not have that rapport with, who you have not built that relationship with, you have not had those conversations with, you should not be moving forward at all unless you get a clear, affirmative yes. Not the absence of a no, but the presence of a yes. And of course, there's the very typical pushback. Oh, what? I'm supposed to stop and ask for like every single step along the way. I can't do anything. Can I even hug you if I haven't asked? Actually, no. No, you shouldn't. You should ask. I'd like to do this. Is that okay? And if that feels awkward, I get that to a certain extent. I remember my freshman year of college. I forget what this was. It might have been an orientation related thing. But I was 18, and the state where I was going to college at the time, we were informed that legally, if somebody had been drinking to the point of legal intoxication, meaning they were past a certain blood alcohol level, that legally they couldn't consent. If they were drunk to a certain degree, even if they said yes, it didn't count. Because they were so intoxicated, they legally were not considered to be in their right mind and they could not legally consent. And I remember being really thrown off by that. Not because I was planning to get a bunch of people really drunk and have sex with them, but just because the idea that I would be looking or being wary of anything other than just the word no was unexpected. It kind of threw me off. The idea that there are times that even a yes doesn't count because someone is not in a state where their judgment is defensible or valid from a legal standpoint. And you can make your arguments like some people like to get drunk and have sex. Is that the worst thing in the world? No, it's not. But these are laws that exist to protect as many people as possible. And I think it's a good law, to be honest. I don't know if it's still on the books there. It's the kind of things that certain kind of people love to challenge. But I do understand hearing these ideas, hearing different models for consent, and being thrown off if you've grown up in a patriarchal, male-dominated culture, focusing on the male gaze and male desires, And just being told no means no, so listen for that no, hearing a different model of consent throws you off. I do understand that. But at the same time, and I've said this elsewhere before, if you can't make asking for consent sexy, that's a skill issue. If you can't make it sexy and keep it in the mood that you're trying to build, to say to someone, I would really like to kiss you. Would you like that? You know, when I kiss you, I'm gonna want to put my hand on this part of your body. Would you want that? If you can't make asking for these things and hearing that yes sexy, that's a you issue. That's something you need to work on. And I mentioned heated rivalry. I now get to point to that as a stellar example of consent being attained mid-sex act in some scenes.
Is this okay?
You know what? It's hot as hell. It can be hard when culture has hammered a certain idea into your head to view it from a different angle and take on a different way of dealing with that, like with consent. But here's what I can tell you from my experience. Broadly speaking, I think rejections have a tendency to stick in the human mind more than acceptances. Not always, not with all things, but a lot of the time. If you're a creative person at all, if you've ever submitted stuff, your writings or whatever, you've probably gotten more rejections, or at least you remember more rejections than acceptances. And those hit harder. Hell, if you're here on YouTube and do what I do, you could have 100 great supportive comments and then one bad comment. That'll stick in your head so much more. And yet, despite that, when I think about my own history, the things that I've done, been part of, gotten to enjoy, I remember those yeses. I remember those yeses a lot more than the no's. Because the no's, ultimately, okay, well, that's just the thing that didn't happen, but the thrill in my heart at hearing a yes, of knowing, not hoping, not crossing my fingers, but knowing they want this too. They want what I want, and together we can move forward for mutual pleasure. That's a wonderful feeling. And I don't want to suggest that the idea that nothing means yes other than yes is also the end point. That might also be a stepping stone, because I think ultimately the best thing that consent should be moving towards is free and open communication at all steps. To go beyond don't do something until you know that they are okay with it, to just an active back and forth where you are okay being told and telling each other proactively, this is what I like, because that creates a situation where both people's pleasure matters. Because even when it's yes means yes, that is a situation where there's usually one person driving the conversation and their desires are the main factor. Next step past that is an active back and forth. Because again, if you're not a monster, you should care that the other person's enjoying it too. And when you have that, it's beautiful. No means no was a good step when it started being spread. We need to move past that. There are better ways. There are ways that model things for a better world moving forward. Because as I said, no means no means that if someone is attracted to you, which is something that you don't have control over, you're not responsible for someone else being attracted to you, but suddenly it becomes your responsibility to stop them if they try to act on that attraction. No, we can do better. So, Does no mean no? Yes, it does. But yes means yes, and nothing means yes other than yes, with the appropriate asterisks on certain circumstances and situations, which I already talked about. Thanks for sticking with me. This has been on my head because of other stuff that I've been talking about on the other channel, but I wanted to share it here. Thank you very much. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And I want you to take care of yourselves out there. Please remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved.